Welcome, welcome to Victoria Rumble Room. We're back for another show. Robin Adair, my co-host with the most, John Jurisic. And John, it's great. We're in the middle of this BC Conservative leadership race. It's kind of a gift that keeps on giving.
Robin, we're in the middle of so many things. It's like, what is going on with this world? But most particularly, this leadership convention for the Conservatives, or race for the leader, is most important because the NDP is crashing all over the place. And
Well,
so we need
they seem to be unable to determine what to do next.
with a whole bunch of issues.
Yeah.
So let's have a credible opposition with a strong leader and a united caucus. Can I only ask for that? Please.
It's just there are so many things to talk about, and we're going to have our special guest on in a minute. We're going to dig in deeper on this BC Conservative leadership race because we do think that's kind of the big story out here on the West Coast. But somebody taking another pot shot or trying to at Donald Trump, that's interesting. The fact they haven't been able to resolve the war with Iran and the Americans, that's pretty fascinating stuff. Apparently, Trump was on the phone with Putin. He was on the phone with Putin in an hour and a half, and they were just being buds again. And Trump's saying, well, the Ukrainians have already lost. And
it's
God. It's so awful.
They're reinventing warfare, the Ukrainians. Oh my
God.
And
then King Charles comes in, and he gets all this great rosy treatment in Washington, D.C. So it's fascinating stuff.
Put in an assassination in the middle of all that, or an attempt.
Man. I as much as I dislike Trump, I don't want to see somebody assassinated in office. I'd just like to see him get bounced in the midterms, but we'll find out what happens there. And of course, Mark Carney, he's talking about our economy being better than expected because, of course, oil prices are sky high. Government makes a lot of money on that. And we still cross our fingers wondering, can Mark Carney deliver? So we'll definitely have to have a guest on to talk about that soon. But let's get into our first guest, John. I think it's time for us to bring in Sheila Orr. You like Sheila Orr.
Absolutely. And she's going to be in the middle of most of this stuff, particularly the provincial Conservative leadership race. Let's zoom her in.
She is the queen of zooming. And John, before we zoom her, let's just say Sheila Orr, an unabashed federal liberal, an unabashed BC liberal, and now I think she's saying, okay, BC Conservatives, I think I can get on board, but with caveats, with lots of caveats. So, yes, on that note, John, zoom her in. Let's zoom her in. And now joining us in the Rumble Room, once again, one of our favorite guests that we've had on this show a number of times over the years, Sheila Orr. Great to have you back.
It's very good to be back. Getting ready for the summer.
Or as we all are, but there's things to think about before that. We're going to talk to you about this BC Conservative leadership race because there's a lot of juicy things to discuss. But right off the top, as everybody knows from your English accent, you have a UK background, and we are all, I think, interested in what goes on with the monarchy, but maybe you pay even more attention than some of us. What was your impression of King Charles III's visit to Washington, D.C.?
I think he has done a remarkable job. He is a statesman. I mean, he's trained, right? He's heavily trained. And I love the way he stood up and said to Trump, well, when Trump said, well, you could be speaking German, and he said, well, yeah, you could be speaking French.
Right.
And then there was a little clip from Macron out of Paris and said, well, that would be chic, which I thought was cool. And he's done wonderful things. He's made it very clear that, Canada, he is Canada. You're not having Canada. But he does it in an amazingly diplomatic way. I mean, Trump is impressed, let's be honest. I mean, I think Trump would like to be the king. Well, that's what he's trying to be, the king, but he'd never be the king. However, I think he's done a great job. I think Britain right now is in a turmoil. Their government is in a real turmoil. And I think that Charles has actually sort of managed to put out there that there's a balance.
And kind of gives the UK a bit of credibility, doesn't it?
I think so. Like Carney has actually done that for Canada after Trudeau. He's given us some credibility. He's acted in a statesmanly manner. And Charles, of course, is trained to be the
Well, no one's going to
biggest
use the
statesman in the
credibility
world.
word about our premier right now, I don't think. There's so many things that he is battling both internally and externally. John, I know we were talking about David Eby just before we got Sheila on the show. You're very concerned about what this province is facing and how we need to look towards the BC Conservatives for some hope. What do you think
The
about that?
province is in a state of crisis and collapse. I
You
don't
know,
recall it ever being this bad on so many fronts, with so much lack of leadership, with so much uncertainty. Come on. And what I'm now that anger is starting to, drift over to the conservatives. Get your shit together, elect somebody, unite the caucus, and start representing us in one of the best provinces and best places to live on the planet. Was
so
that what you're expecting, Robin?
I have to say, to roll back the damage that has been done is going to take supreme leadership. We know that. I mean, I was in government with Gordon Campbell when we did a lot of stuff and we took a lot of hits, but nothing this bad. The general public, we're political people. We know everything that's going on. Most of the public don't. So let's have a starting point. Okay. We have a BC Conservative Party that needs to win to beat the NDP so we can roll back this damage. The damage will be rolling back for 10, 20 years
Yep.
before we start to see anything that really resembles a province like it used to be. So what is the starting point for the BC Conservatives? And that is something that I think we're not really addressing. Okay, we have 5 candidates applying for the job of the CEO and the leader of a $98 billion budget and a staff of tens and tens of thousands. That is a huge corporation, right? Huge. So we're putting 5 people at the door and saying, few of you have no skill set. Some of you do have some skill set, but come on in and take over. Get real. You know what? That would never happen in the private. Could you imagine somebody walking up to IBM and saying, "Hey, I've been on committees, I've had children, I've got a degree, and I want to take over your corporation." So, okay, that's the starting point. So, with beyond the starting point, what do we have? We have 5 candidates that really believe, and good for them. I know what it's like to go out there. Robin, you've been out there. You know what it's like to run. It is not easy. In fact, it's horrible. But they're doing it, so give them credit for that. Delusional? Absolutely, you're delusional if you really believe you can pull this off on your own. So get that out of the way. Candidates? Well, we only have really one that's totally up to date. One that's actually sitting there this week, sat there last week, knows what's going on, sat in Treasury Board. He's not, I recognize that Peter Millibar may not be the sexiest looking guy in the world, but he's he does have his stuff in place. He kind of knows what he's doing. He's made it very clear. He doesn't have the style that people are looking for, but we had style with Trudeau, and look where that got us. You might say Trump had style. Well, look where that got us. So I
But we
think
like our
Milbar,
BC leaders with style,
yeah,
Sheila, don't we?
we don't need style. The
We do
Bennetts didn't
live,
have
Sheila, we
style.
do live in a communications age. I mean, you're a
We,
living and beaming example of that. You've
well,
got to
I,
be able to sell this stuff. And one of the problems that we had with John Rustad was that John Rustad was not seen as a natural leader. He wasn't seen as the guy that could really deliver, irrespective of whether you thought he had the skill set or the background. It was interpreted that he wasn't really ready for that. And I think no one would claim that David Eby comes off that way either. So who are the great communicators? And I just looked at, there was a poll out this week. So I'd like you to comment on it. The poll showed that actually leading the campaign right now, at least at the moment, is Carolyn Elliott from the North Shore, that she's actually signed the most new members and raised the most money. And behind her And in big swaths of the north and the Up Island and certain areas in the province is Carrie Lynn Finlay.
Mhm.
Carrie Lynn Finlay, the former member of parliament. And then after that, in number 3 is Peter Millibar, who's very strong in Kamloops in the central interior, Ian Black, and then Yuri Fulmer in the final spot. And in the debates that I've seen on television, they've televised a couple now. It always seems to be a gang up against Carol and Elliott, which tells me that the other candidates are seeing the same poll that I just talked about, and she's seen as the front runner. How do you see her?
She is polling as a front runner, but we've seen that before and they haven't won. The thing with Caroline Elliott is she would be a fabulous MLA. She would represent her community. I'm going to interject here because I want this point made to everybody. Nobody's asked these candidates if they would run as an MLA. That to me is commitment. If you say yes, if I don't win the leadership, I will run as an MLA, I will then say, well, they're really committed to the cause. If they don't, then what are they doing? They're just trying to get the top job without really being committed to the cause. Caroline Elliott, you know she's backed by Kevin Falcons, that's her brother-in-law. You know she's backed by Gordon Campbell. Now, I watched those debates, and I've seen this stuff go around in an ever-decreasing circle. Caroline is young, she's spunky, she's attractive, but I heard a lot of Gordon Campbell and Kevin Falcons in the background. At some point, I thought she might have an earpiece in, and that bothers me. And I'll tell you why. We're voting somebody in to be the leader, not to be somebody that's coming in that's going to be supported in the background by previous people who are qualified, but their day is done. So that's why I think Caroline Elliott would make a great MLA. I don't think she'd make a great leader. Not yet. Finlay is different. She's highly qualified. She's skilled. She knows what she's doing. I heard a comment the other day which quite offended me when they said, but she's a bit too old. Oh, give your head a shake. How old do you think Trump is? How old do you think, get
Well,
real.
too old. Trump's too old.
Yeah, too old. But she does have a skill set. She does know what she's doing. And she would, I think, be quite good. She's very conservative. And again, we've got this whole issue with, are you prepared to be a big tent? And I think she's a bit iffy on that department. Millibar is a big tent. No problem there. That's easy. Yuri, forget it. He doesn't get it at all, as far as I'm concerned. We'll sit back on some seats. We'll bring in BC One or whatever it's called, and we'll all be happy together. No, that'll never happen. So that's a very naive politician, as far as I'm concerned. And as far as Ian Black goes, I I worry that Ian is not doing it for the right reasons. I think he's doing it because he's always wanted the job, and I'm not sure how open he will be to running the province with a firm hand. So that brings us back to the ones that are qualified to do the job, which is actually Peter Millibar and Lindley. I mean, she's the one that could do it. Caroline, we'll see. Front runners never actually necessarily win. And
Yeah,
as I said,
and here we
would
are.
somebody not ask the question, would you be an MLA?
So here we are. When is the actual
May the
convention?
30th, I think.
Okay,
That's
so
right.
a
May the
month away.
30th. That's right. Yeah.
In this day and age, 1,000 bazillion things can happen. I'm gonna ask you a question
Absolutely.
based on your analysis. British Columbians want somebody, some party, to deal with affordability, with healthcare, with getting out of debt, with creating new job opportunities for our youth. Notice I didn't say any social issues there. They're
Mhm.
important, and and we all care about them, but those are not the priorities. Which of those candidates are going to listen to me as a voter? And I don't watch these debates. Okay, so I don't actually. I'm hearing new stuff from you guys. Consider me the run-of-the-mill person. Which of these folks are going to deal with these anxieties out there that I've indicated?
I think that who could do this? Peter, okay, everyone everyone's talking about dripper. We're all concerned about dripper, and it's become the subject. But really, it isn't as important as the economy. It's everybody out there, like my kids, you
But
know.
aren't they directly tied, Sheila? I mean, if 200 indigenous groups have veto power or all future land management, pipelines, industrial development, that's the economy, isn't it? So they're totally linked. If we don't do something about DRIPA, aren't we risking the future of development in the province?
So, Robin, I totally agree with you on that subject. You and I understand it. We get it. We know what dripper is. We talk about dripper, but you know what? When you talk to my kids, they don't talk about dripper. They talk, and we know they're connected. I'm not saying they're not connected. I'm talking about a subject that they want to talk about with a candidate that's going to try and run for the top job. And that is, I can't afford to do this anymore. I don't have enough money. I can't, pay for my groceries. I think they need to speak to the public more directly about finances, about money. Yeah, we can link it into Dripper, but I think that's when you kind of lose people. I'm not saying, I agree with Dripper, but I'm talking about how you get the general public, or actually not the general public. Remember, this is just about the membership.
Yeah. Yeah,
How you
but
get the membership of
which
the
of these five, Sheila, or which number of these five are talking this language, this affordability language?
I think the one person, and I'm going to say it again, because Peter Miliband sits in cabinet and he has been the critic, the finance critic. He understands money and he does understand that. And I think he can talk to people about how they are broke, how to get ahead financially, how to get the province ahead financially, what to do with the budget, where they're wasting the money. And we know that that's massive. And if you talk to the public and say, the government is wasting so much money on this, and this, they get that. We're spending way too much money on communications in the Premier's office. We're spending way too much money on things that are not benefiting the public. More offices, more people working. I mean, the government now, I don't know how much it's grown by, but it's immense. So how do we stop that? How do we stop pouring more and more money into running the government? Well, it's going to be very hard to. There's got to be a wage. There's got to be a freeze, and then there's got to be sort of just an attrition where people will retire and bring the government back to size so that people understand that their money, my money, is being spent properly.
And at some point,
Now,
we have to generate revenue.
we do have
I
to
don't hear
generate,
that from the NDP ever.
and we're
I would
going to
like to
talk.
see us take advantage of our resource capacities
Yeah.
and align with the rest of the country, whose goal is to reignite the resource development capacity of our country.
So how do we re-energize the economy? Well, we've seen it. I mean, Todd Stone's now taken over, as you know, in the mining sector. He is with an association of the miners. The mining people are just waiting. They're chomping at the bit. Let us get in there. Let us dig. Let us find we've got it. Now, again, we can segue back into Dripper. What I'm trying to say to you is I'm trying to figure out the candidate that can talk to people about what they understand. And as much as I'll repeat it, we've talked about Dripper. The average person doesn't quite get it. They get it when you talk about how much money is being wasted and how much money the province is not making. So you have a business and you're not selling enough widgets. What do? You have to cut back on one thing and make a better widget.
So, one of the things that I know they're fighting about in the actual leadership contest when they go back and forth at each other, a lot of those things are around social issues. They're around, you know, how early you should be able to transition if you're in the school system, or what they teach in the schools about decolonization and being guilty that we're all guilty of being settlers on stolen land and how this all needs to be turned around. And they get into, how they're going to go after the social engineering that they say the NDP is already fostering, which I think is true to a degree. So is that a good thing to be doing just within the party to win the party leadership? Is it actually a good tactic? Because it seems to be one of the dominant discussion points when the five of them get together.
No, I don't believe so. Social issues are always there. They're getting worse, and they're getting worse because of bad leadership. But social issues never go away. There's never enough money in the social issues. Look at the budget. Where does the money go? Healthcare and education. What's not good? Healthcare and education. So social issues, no, I think they're going about it the wrong way. I think you've got to go. The membership of the party are not necessarily hardcore politicos. They're members of the party. They hear what's going on, they chat with each other, but they're not in there, like we are, listening to debates and listening to, I mean, I've listened to both, but I've listened to both the debates. And who else has? Nobody really. My kids didn't even know what it was. So the people in this province are broke. They're fed up. Oh, there's the ultra rich, we know, but the average working person is struggling. They really are. They are.
Yeah, and the
We got
solutions aren't that hard.
they
Just
work
turn
hard
on
and
the
they're not.
stove.
Yeah, they're not getting their money. So if it was me, I go right back to the heart of the problem. I go right into the hearth of the house, right into the kitchen where they're broke. Where we're not going to go for supper tonight. We're not going to go to White Spot because we really can't afford it. We used to go before. That's what people want to hear. And all the other stuff is very intellectual and very good and very important. But it doesn't drive through to the average person. I was going to say the average Joe, but I'd have to say Joe and Jane now, wouldn't
Joe,
I?
Jane,
You got to be
Joe.
politically correct on that.
Well,
Hey
I'm never going to
Sheila,
be politically correct, so I'm not even going to try.
Sheila, I can remember a long time ago, many years ago now, when I was thinking about running for political office, and you were adamant. The most important thing, if you want to get that nomination to run, is to get the most people. You need to get the most people out for the nomination, and
That's
you've got
it.
to sign people up. The people who sign people up, everybody thinks it's great speeches and great policies and looking good. The trick is to get the people out to vote for you, and
Bums in the seats.
that's what you said, and I took it to heart, and at least that part of my campaign worked really well.
Hmm. And
Didn't work so well on election night, but it doesn't matter. What I guess I'm saying is the person who's signed up the most people apparently is Carolyn Elliott. And as you say, she's got some very experienced people behind her, like a former premier and a former party leader of BC United, who are also helping her. That must count for something. In other words, are you still waging that she's not going to win because you don't necessarily think she's the person who's ready?
she has got to win right out on the first ballot. If
Mm.
she doesn't win on the first ballot, then I can tell you right now, it's a wide open gate. And to win on the first ballot when you've got five candidates is no mean feat.
Mm.
And remember, this is a weighted vote. It's not person for person. It's 10 votes per riding. So, she can do really well in Surrey and really, really rotten up in the Okanagan. And doesn't mean a thing. You get the same amount of votes. So there's that. So she has to pull this off. Not easy to pull off when you've got four other people behind you. So she has signed up a lot of people, and I get that, and that's great. I that's what you do, and she's done it. And she's done it with a lot of help. But she has to win it on the first trounce. Now there are people like Mike McDonald, who, as you know, is a good political analyst, and he has a polling company, I believe, and he believes that she might pull it off on the first ballot. I don't. I think, and then it's an open door. And then I think it's your second vote. Millibar is pulling in tons of those,
Mm.
tons and tons. So I think if she pulls it off, well, she ran a good campaign. then we get into everything we have talked about, which is how she wins the election. So we have spent a lot of time on how she'll win, how any of these people will win the election. At the end of the day, they've got till May the 30th to figure out how they're going to win this.
Okay,
And that,
let me pull you from the right to the left, Sheila, because you're connected, you have a large network into the ledge, etc., I assume. There've got to be some of these NDP MLAs that are disappointed with the economic development policies of
Mhm.
this government, which is about all any of us are thinking about. Is EB at risk at all within
Oh,
his own party?
no question EB's at risk. I think the problem with us, with the BC Conservatives, is that problem. If he decides to step down, and he might, and they bring in a new leader, it's a whole different ballgame. Then the BC Conservatives are going to have to be really, really efficient and good to try and beat that machine, because that is a machine. Unlike us, that sit on the right or center of the right, and we have this big tent and we all talk about loving each other and being a big tent, we're not committed and we're not driven. The other side is driven. And they get a new leader. Well, God help the BC
Talking
Conservatives.
about being driven and who's organized to the teeth is this Green Party, which over the last several elections, despite being this big,
I know.
is got an oversized influence on government. What have you heard about them?
Well, I think that the new leader, this young gal, I've forgotten her name already. Sorry about that. I actually did try to contact her because I'm a big believer in women getting involved. It doesn't matter what party, women get up there, go on, get up there and get involved. And I left two messages of which neither were returned. So obviously she's got her own ideas. That's fine. Good for her. I don't think they're going to play as big an influence as they did last time. I really don't. I think I
Well,
I
we
think
don't.
all hope so.
I think it's Emily Lowen, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we all hope so.
Yeah.
yeah.
But the last two, three, whatever, how many we get Weaver on here?
Well,
He
Weaver put her up for a Rhodes
regaled.
Scholarship. She was on the short list for a Rhodes Scholarship,
Bright
and
girl. She's a
very bright young woman. She's pretty, she's smart, and but I don't see the Green Party gaining much traction. Do you really, John?
No, I don't. And I don't
No.
think they have traction except in one or two ridings, and that's all it took to basically, guide the agenda. So I was curious. Okay, well, I
So
certainly
Caroline
hope that is
Elliott.
not the case.
See, Caroline Elliott is a bright girl. She's a bright woman.
Hmm.
Not a girl. She's a bright woman. But she doesn't have the skill set required to be the leader of the party, as far as I'm concerned. But she's bright. She's like the girl in the Green Party. There's a really big place for these women. I mean, there really is. Get in as an MLA, be a councillor, become an MLA. Do what Christy Clark did. I mean, Christy worked from the bottom up. She did. She did a good job.
Well, but what about, I mean, just before we let this go, and we'll talk about a couple of the things before we let you go completely, but I'm kind of surprised you haven't talked more about Ian Black. I mean, the so-called experts, the armchair quarterbacks who watched the debates, were all giving him high marks for being one of the more effective debaters, that he and Millibar both stayed out of the social issues debates, didn't spend all their time trashing Carolyn Elliott, spent way more time talking about the economy, and as a result, they felt that Ian Black actually did extremely well in those debates. You don't sound like you give him much hope of being able to catch the imagination of conservatives at this point.
But you see, you're asking, this is my opinion.
Well,
I'm talking like I can't, on Ian Black, I've got to come at it from my point of view. So Ian Black, you're right. He did well in the debates. He said all the right things, and he's done that. I find as a woman, he's not offensive to me, don't get me wrong, but I find him patronizing and arrogant. So, and I'm the voter. I look out there, I watch him and I listen to him and I do know him. I don't know him well, but I know his work because obviously I know what goes on in the legislature. And I think he's a self-promoter. And I believe that I don't believe he's very good at communicating with other people. He hasn't been with me anyway. So I'm trying to be a
Oh,
little bit
you're going
pragmatic.
with your gut. I
I'm going,
understand that.
so this is my gut. Okay, this is Sheila Orr saying David Black, for me as a leader,
Ian Black.
is sorry, yes, beg your pardon.
It's worth correcting you. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm glad you did actually on that one. Uh, that goes to show how much time I put into him. So I just, for me, my gut is that I, as a woman, don't particularly like the way he responds to various things. I'm trying to be cautious here. I'm sure you can tell.
I know,
So
and
he's
Sheila,
not
we
my
appreciate. I
favorite.
didn't mean to
So
put you in a corner. I
yeah,
just thought, for the Rumble Room's sake, we don't want to make it seem like we're skirting around people who potentially are doing very well in this campaign.
yeah.
And Ian Black does have he was a former cabinet minister. He's been around, so I
So
just
to
wanted to.
make it clear, then he has an arrogance about him and a patronizing attitude that I think will not do well when it comes to a general election.
Mm.
Fair enough. Fair enough. John, we should talk a little bit about the feds. Eh? Let's talk about.
Oh, absolutely. We've got Sheila here. We've got time, and we got
Yeah.
a bazillion things to talk about. So let's go and move to the federal scene, okay? When is Polyev going to change his tune? When are they going to get that that doesn't work?
Well,
When? Like,
I'm a card-carrying liberal. My
Yeah.
husband is a card-carrying conservative, and is very, very, very pro any leader of the Conservative Party. Polyev is like all the conservatives. The Conservative Party just, kind of changed their leaders like they changed their underwear. I mean, they just keep rolling it
oh,
around.
you're in
Well,
fire
they've
today.
had him for a while. They've had him
They've
longer
had him
than.
for a while, but they've had him for a while, but it's not helping them.
But it'll
You
help him.
know,
I would say that Polyev will warm the hearts of Canadians again in a year's time if Carney doesn't deliver. He's making a lot of promises, unveiling lots of things that give us a lot of hope. I mean, so far, I've been very impressed with a lot of his messaging, which I think he's borrowed richly out of the conservative handbook. But I also think that he has to prove and he has to show, okay, here's where I said we're going to go, and here's evidence of where we're going, as opposed to just promises. And if he can do that, I think he's going to be prime minister as long as he wants. And if he doesn't, I think Polyev is going to be in a very strong position to recapture a lot of votes.
I think that Carney has signed off quite a few deals, and I don't have a list. I wished I did, but I know he has signed off on quite a few deals. I mean, he did reduce the gas tax, what is it, last week? But of course, the gas went down for 2 days and then went back up again. So obviously, the oil companies are making the money on our backs. There you go. Those are the big, big, big corps for you. But I think that he has been making inroads. And, I am pro Carney and I am a liberal. So you have to understand I'm coming at this from a bit of a biased point of view. But I do believe that he has made some inroads. Um, the big promises that he made, if he's a smart politician, he will wait a year and roll those out. Why wouldn't you? You're going into, you want to be reelected. You don't throw that all out at the beginning. You go out and you do the work. He is a statesman. There's no question he's a statesman. He's very popular. He's liked around the world. He got a standing ovation in Australia. I mean, twice. So he's liked, and so he's doing all of that good work. And then the rumblings will happen. It always does in politics. After a year or two, all of a sudden, people are getting fed up with you, and they want to ruffle your feathers a little, and they'll ruffle his. And then, and he is smart as a politician. He'll roll out stuff that he's been doing, and he'll start rolling it out. We've seen it here where they roll out the same stuff over and over again, but he will, and it'll build up until the election. And that is a
okay,
good campaign.
I want to use an analogy because I still don't get what's going on here. So I'm running a business, and I know we can't, equalize a business to politics of a G7 country. Nonetheless, I have a product, and this product is a million miles ahead of all the other products that are being sold at this time. In fact, about 25% more, as it turns out. Out of nowhere, another product comes in. I don't even know the name of this other product. And they start to beat the sales of my product. And I don't change. I don't change my product at all. and the other product begins to sell more and eventually is the leader. In what business would you not change that product, Sheila? I.e. Polyev, please. Your policies actually work. We've adopted so many of them. Why don't they change the style?
I
Why?
think I I think for the Conservatives to win, again, it goes back to the general public that look at a 15-second soundbite, right? And in that 15-second soundbite, they're going to need a new leader. Because right now, there's too much on Polyev that they're going to remember. Oh, he said this, he did that, he didn't do this. Social media has changed campaigning completely differently. Everything you say or do has got to be done within 15 seconds, 30 at the most if you're lucky. So Polyev he's already tarnished. So take the two leaders. I think Polyev probably would be a good leader, but let's be honest. You've got Carney and you've got Polyev. You got this guy going out there looks good, acting good, bit of a rock star, got the old action. Polyev, not so good, not happy, said the wrong things. Tell me, they got to replace him. It's pretty simple.
This is one of those classic.
And yet, John, you have to admit. I mean, I go full circle here. Sheila's a liberal, and of
Oh,
course,
I am a liberal. You're right.
oh, come on, but I mean,
Yeah.
if in a year's time Carney hasn't delivered on all these things he's promising, Sheila, Polyev will seem a lot better. Polyev seemed great compared to Justin Trudeau. He was going to win a landslide if Trudeau had stayed. So to say that he's damaged and tarnished, I think he misstepped and didn't realize how dangerous the Trump situation was. And Carney jumped on it with both feet. He showed better political instinct. He gets full applause for that. I'm glad he won, but he still has to deliver, Sheila.
Like I told you, I really believe that that's going to happen. I think that they're rolling it out. Yeah, you're right. I am biased, and I've always been very frank about that. But don't forget, I live with a hardcore conservative who drives me crazy.
Yeah. And there have been instances in Canadian political history in which getting rid of the leader was the solution because the policies of the party worked. And that often happens with the Conservatives. Look at what Carney's adopted so many.
Yeah, but Carney adopted the conservative platform, basically.
Well, this is what I mean,
Yeah.
So actually,
Would you call that a smart move?
Very smart move. Very smart of you, Sheila. Hey, Sheila, I think we're reaching the end of the show. John, fair to say we're reaching the end of the show?
We are reaching the end, but I want to have a bit more fun with Sheila, if I may.
Okay, please.
If I may, in fact, with both of you.
Please.
I'd like a little bit of looking into the future, okay? At this stage, Donald Trump, President of the United States, seems to be dismantling all of the ways in which voting fairness can happen in the US. And I think he will accelerate that to the point that no matter what happens, he's going to win in November. And then I think that there will be a true legitimate civil war in the US that will destabilize the world. If the Democrats are fully, they should be winning, but he pulls all the levers of voting fairness out of the election. What are both of your reactions to that statement? And you can see that we're having fun because who knows really what's going to happen.
I don't think there'll be a civil war, but there already is a war. There's already a war in the United States between the left and the right. And I'm going to give you a quick example. I wanted to get a particular product that I bought in the States quite a long time ago. It's a pillow. And I found the company, which is way down in the southern states of America. So I tried to buy it online, but it wouldn't let me. So I phoned them. This was just this week. And I got a really southern sounding kind of guy, but it was a message to start with saying, "Praise the Lord for phoning us, we bless you," and blah, blah, blah. A guy got on the phone and he said, "Hi, ma'am, how can I help you? And hope you're having the precious Lord's Day," or something. I thought, okay. I said, "Look, I'm in Canada and I want to buy one of your pillows." You wouldn't believe his attitude. It was, "We don't ship to Canada." I said, "Oh." He said, no, we don't do that." He said, "You can look on Amazon, but they're not there. We do not ship up to you." Oh, okay. Okay. That was the attitude. Now think about that, millions more. So there is a war. It's already there. They're fighting with each other. And I don't think it can turn into a civil war, but how is he going to pull it back? I don't know.
Well, I think the Americans are going to actually, there's going to be a very profound change in the
Well, they
House. I
keep
think
trying to shoot
the
him, and they
Congress
haven't
is
done
going to go
that yet.
Democrat with this midterm. There's a chance even the Senate could go, and then it's going to be a very different government for the next 2 years. The one thing about politics you can always count on, it'll always change, and it'll always change in ways we don't expect. And I think on that happy note, Sheila, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for fielding all these difficult questions with your usual good humor.
Well, it
And
was fun.
John, I think fair to say that we are going to continue to rumble on.